Welcome to DFS Insights, where the game behind the game comes to life. I am David Geislinger, and the teams up on the block are the Dallas Mavericks at the Minnesota Timberwolves. All right, let's get into it. So, the Dallas Mavericks took down OKC, and the Minnesota Timberwolves came back and won that, pretty intense game there in Game 7 against the Nuggets. So here we are, the Western Conference Finals, Game 1. Dallas coming into Minnesota to try to take down the Timberwolves here. So let's go ahead and get into it. I did try to do some research and pull up some previous games. However, none of them, most of them, either one set of players, Dallas Mavericks players sat out, or the other team, Minnesota, had players out. So there's really no good reference previous games through this season. So let's just go ahead and get straight into the breakdown here of Game 1. So looking at it, Minnesota are the favorites. They are at home, coming in at 4 points. Not to mention that Dallas has lost every Game 1 in this playoffs this year. So Vegas might be right for the first time, I think, in this matchup. So coming in at 4-point favorites, over/under is 207, not too high, which understandable. Minnesota has a pretty solid defense, and Mavericks it really depends on which Luka shows up, but these stats are basically for the entire playoffs. So the Minnesota's coming in at 116.1 offensive rating, 107.6 defensive rating, and a 93 pace. And the Dallas Mavericks are coming in at about a 113.9 offensive rating, 110.6 defensive rating, and about similar pace, 93.38. So no real pace advantage to anybody, which makes sense. Pace is typically a little slower in the playoffs due to people, I guess, stepping up on defense here. So notable injuries. Dallas Mavericks, you got Luka Doncic coming in at a game time decision. He is probable. He's played the last three, the entire time he's been listed as quote unquote game time decision. So there's no doubt in my mind he is playing, and he better come with it, especially at a salary of $17K. Mike Conley is more questionable. He's a game time decision questionable. He did sit out that one game against the Nuggets. However, he did play the next two with that game time decision tag. So with a few extra days of rest, I don't see there's no reason that he shouldn't play, unless for whatever reason it got worse in practice or whatever. So yeah, so with that, let's go ahead and get into my three key players here. So I'm going to go ahead and giving you my leverage plays of the slate here. So these are where I think the most optimal place to be putting these players. So giving you the best chance to make that unique lineup. So where I'm giving you these three players, like I said, as a leverage play, you might not want to potentially roster all of them at the same time, because that might be too much leverage, and then you're going to be sacrificing too much of that median projection. So you want to make that best, the most positive EV lineup, expected value lineup that you can. So where one or two of these players might be great, all three of them might be too much, and actually sacrificing too much of that median projection. So keep that in mind. Obviously, every lineup is different, and you want to be weighing the lineup and not the individual player. So with that in mind, getting over here to my first pick, I'm going to go with Anthony Edwards. I like him at the MVP, especially coming in. He's 15.5K. Doncic is at 17K. So just with that price difference, people are going to naturally just put Doncic more in the MVP, because quite a few players, I mean, not the pros, but quite a few players, associate that salary with how much points they're going to get. So with that, you can take advantage there. Not to mention also, Anthony Edwards has the potential. He's coming in 40.1 minutes, usage 29.2. averaging 49.1. This is all for all the playoff games, round 1 and round 2 together. He's projected about 40 points, 39.9. So why I think he's, the MVP leverage is looking back at the Denver, his, overall average ownership at MVP was 25.2, and his star average was 33.6. So he does have the potential to be that MVP. So like I said, it does mention it does correlate with how Doncic does. So if Luka has an okay game, and Edwards has an okay game, having Edwards up there in that MVP definitely will set you apart. You're going to be, Doncic is probably roughly going to be, he was averaging about 50 to 60% MVP last matchup against OKC in the MVP. So 60% of the people are going to be probably going Luka, especially with that salary up in MVP, and you're gonna set yourself apart coming in at 25%. So obviously you're hoping Edward does good, or just slightly a little bit less than Luka, so you can go ahead and get that leverage play. So so with that, keep that in mind. Obviously I'll be playing both of them, Luka and Edwards, at the MVP, but I'll be using Edwards as those leverage plays to try to get me that unique lineup to get that 50K to myself. So with that, moving on here to my second leverage play, I'm gonna go ahead and go with PJ Washington. He had a great series last against the OKC here. He did start stepping up, especially when Luka kind of he was still in the driver's seat, but he started being a little bit more facilitator than he's used to. So I like PJ Washington at the star position, coming in at 11.5K. He's getting 35.5 minutes. His usage 16.9. He's averaging 28.9 fantasy points. He's projected 31. Where those might not be star numbers, he did have a few games here against OKC where he was 55, 37, 35 fantasy points. So if he can have another one of those productive fantasy nights, especially with Minnesota, who seem to be giving up to Mr. Consistent Eric Gordon, averaging about 35, 38 fantasy points. So if PJ Washington can do the same, having him up in that star position, definitely going to give you that leverage, and probably one of the better leverage plays. Obviously you're still hoping he does get those points, but looking back at the OKC, his average lineup or his average ownership at the star was only about 3%, 2.9. So, and then his pro ownership jumps up quite a bit to about 19%. So will I be having him in the pro? Absolutely. Will I be having him in the star for leverage? Absolutely. So it's all based on my lineup construction, because like I said, you're not only looking for the leverage at the spot, but you're making sure it goes well with your lineup, because if I do too much leverage plays, then I'm putting my lineup at probably greater odds to win than the contest odds actually are. So if you're looking, there's a rough projection, but if you're looking at a $15 entry, 764 entries it looks like here, so that's about a 1 to 784 odds. So you're looking for lineups that kind of roughly match that. So having him at that 2.9% star, it does definitely help you get there, and then you can be a little bit more chalky and get those higher median players there, so that way you can get those points. So yeah, that's why I like him up at that star position. So getting here into my third leverage play, I like Naz Reid. Yeah, especially I like his salary, that 8.5K. I like having great players down there. Where there are some good potential players lower than him. He's kind of like top end, I want to say low tier player, but he's up there. Yeah, he's getting 20.8 8 minutes. When he's in, he's getting insane usage for his minutes, 21.6. That 6-man award, as much as, I want to say it should have gone to Malik, and I still believe it should have gone to Malik. He would have been my second choice for sure. And that's just me being biased against, being a Kings fan. But anyways, he's averaging 19 points. That's, okay for 8.5 salary. He's projected 20.7 this matchup, but just looking back, kind of game log trolling, he did have, a 33-point game, a 25-point game, 27-point game, 23-point game against Denver. So, he has the potential there. Now, where you're going to get your leverage is at that pro spot. Utility, he's going to be so chalky. You're going to have to make it up. You're going to have to, probably go with that PJ Washington in the start just so you can help with the chalk. So just looking back here at the Denver matchup in pro, 4.4% owned. So, I mean, compared to what he was in the utility, 30.3. That's average. So that's insane. Like you said, everybody's going to say, 8.5K salary, yeah, let's just throw him down in the utility. And that's what probably you're going to get, especially since this is game one and people don't know the rotations that are going to be employed. So everybody's kind of just going with, their best guess as of now to see how it pans out. That's typically what happens in games 1 and 2, where, the teams are filling out. Game 3, it kind of tightens up a little bit. So I think he's going to be extremely owned, especially if people are going to be 8.5 salary. There's no way he can be in the pro position. So use that, put him up in the pro position. Now, you're obviously hoping he still has one of those good games, but I think he's one of those lower end salary players that can have a good game in that pro position. So, yeah, with that, those are my 3 key leverage plays. Let me know, please make sure you hit that like, subscribe, notification bell, and put down in the comments who else do you think, what do you, ask any questions about any player, and I'll give you my opinion on what I think about them, and what place you plan on putting them in. So, that way I can kind of have a reference point of kind of where you're at, and just remember, you are looking for, you're looking at the lineup. You're not looking at the player. Because because a player might be in a negative EV play. However, you can't play, more or less, you can't play all positive expected value players. Very hard, obviously with the salary constraints and such. So you might have to play a negative one, but just keep in mind it is a lineup. So with that in mind, utilize these leverage plays here, or if you have a question and you didn't agree with any of my leverage plays, you want to know what I think of another player, drop that in the comments. I'll be more than happy to give you my opinion on that. So with that, good luck. We just finished the game 1, the overtime game 1 for the Eastern Conference finals there. So hopefully the next video will be covering, game 2. Just wanted to kind of see how that game pans out as we've been mostly covering, the Western Conference games. So kind of wanted to sit back and take in some information there before, giving a good video there. So look forward, to game 2 and, trying to cover all these Western Conference final games. So with that, good luck, and hope to see you up on the leaderboard.